Hi, and welcome to Who Am I podcast with me, Stephen.
And this is William.
And we're on to episode 3. And if you listened to the last one, we are continuing with our discussion on AI, robotics, and I guess how that relates to the progress of humanity.
Yeah, is it progress at all?
Exactly. And that's the fun we're going to have today.
Yeah. Seems like for some people, progress is just finding something new. But unfortunately, it's often the case that whenever you find something in technology that makes life easier or better, like health-wise, or comfort, or shelter, food, clothing, communication, whatever, it also comes with a downside. I don't know if that's part of the technology or part of humanity, that we just use anything there is for good and bad, depending on who we are or how pressed we feel, how desperate we feel. I think anyone has the potential of doing bad. And
the intention behind the progress. But it's interesting what you said about the making things easier.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to be the goal, is to somehow make our lives as humans easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always think that's a good thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, it depends how you define easier. But in terms of, I guess, science progress, that's more trying to answer questions. Like science progress itself is and the robotics side, I guess the intention is more, let's do this because we can.
Mm-hmm.
I think, rather than is it going to actually advance us in any conscious or physical way. It's just, hey, we're here now, let's keep going.
Right. We have values and goals, like everyone for themselves, but also collectively. And when new technology comes along, we usually try to, some people try to see the new opportunities, what is now available, how will this change our outlook on life, on our purpose, on our identity. But others will just try to use the new technology for the same old goals. So I don't know if I've told you, I follow John McAfee on Twitter.
Okay.
He became famous through his antivirus software.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. He's a big name in antivirus. And now he is a huge proponent of cryptocurrency. And,
okay, to do that.
And so when you think of cryptocurrency, the first things that pop in your head is probably Bitcoin, digital currency, and the currency market.
Yes.
There are tons of currencies, hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know. And people trade them a lot to get profit, which is interesting. It's fun. There's no taxing involved because it's decentralized. The government has no access to it, at least. Well, even though the blockchain is public, the government cannot see who's doing what because it's all anonymized. And a profound thing that McAfee said about that was, people, this is not a toy. You can do so many great things with blockchain. Stop treating it like a toy and just making more money. That's the old way of thinking about life and how the world works. We could be so much more independent. We could be so much more free. He's an anarchist, by the way. He wants people to see their potential. And so you just reminded me of this when you said, are we using new technology to progress in our understanding of who we are and what the purpose of life is? Or are we just using it for the same old things?
Yeah, it's I guess in our current culture of society, we're very much obviously money based. Everything is money, money, money. And you can't get away from that unless you've made lots of money. Like, you, I guess, work to live and live to work. That's the constant cycle.
Yeah.
and it's painful that there's very few ways to get out of that. Because until you do, then do you get to be able to explore other systems like because cryptocurrency, I think it requires a certain amount of understanding of technology. And it also, the regulation of these things, again, you say the anarchy side of it and having it free reign.
It's the
which
Wild
I
West.
believe,
Yeah.
which I believe in. But at the same time, my brain contradicts that, or the culture or the psychology of our culture contradicts that. I'd be like, well, who's to say one person just comes along, is a genius at it, makes billions, and then writes everyone else off? Like, how do you regulate and stop things like that from happening?
I know. I can't say I'm an anarchist. I see some very attractive aspects of the ideology, but I'm not sure how to think about it yet. I see that no matter who is in power, let's say in the industry or in government or the banks, whatever, no matter who is in power, they will abuse the power somehow, because nobody's perfect, and they're at the top level. There's no one over them to make sure that they're going by the rules. So at the UN level, for example, it's just countries agreeing on stuff. They call them resolutions, right? And then there's no way to what's the word? Legislate? Like, there will be no repercussions if you don't keep to your promise.
Yeah, there's no one regulating the regulators.
Right. And so anarchists don't believe in no order. That's not the way they mean it. They believe that everyone is responsible for being orderly, for being peaceful. Like, they have this non-aggression principle that all interactions and all trade in particular should be to the benefit of both parties. There should never be exploitation. But I don't see how that could be enforced either. That's so idealistic.
Yeah.
But I do like the point that everyone is responsible for disciplining themselves, for being in charge of themselves, and making sure that your values are harmonic in themselves and work as well as possible with those of others, without
responsibility,
forcing them onto someone else. Yeah, responsibility is the right word. Yeah.
And that's hard because how do you implement that? Because do you force people to one generation to get that mentality into their system and then let it fly? Because how do you change the current status quo? Like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I just know I want to be a good influence on other people.
Yeah.
So this could be like a microcosm of what we're talking about. Like, we start to change the world by changing ourselves and being a good influence on the people around us, like immediately around us.
So, but again, bring it, because often we think too big in life. We think somehow we must make a massive political or social, cultural change or whatever. But as you say, it just one step at a time in your own little circle of yourself, and then your circle of friends, and those you associate with.
Yeah. I think that's the ideal way for humanity to make progress. I don't like this hierarchical view that so many of us have, that there's always one at the top who is the leader, who makes decisions for everyone else. Obviously, some people need guidance. They need to mature before they develop the self-discipline. And that happens through example, sometimes through force. But I don't know. It's a bit maybe more like parenting.
Yeah, education tends to be that medium these days, because parenting doesn't really happen much anymore. It's you get parented, you get taught at school, whereas you just get taught at home as well.
Yeah.
Whereas now you come home, you go out with your friends, you go do whatever you want, really.
So many homes don't have two parents. That's another disadvantage.
or 3 or 4. Just to, I was weirdly, there's a completely side topic here, but I was thinking about this
Okay.
this week, about the family structure
Mm-hmm.
and how it was really grating in my brain why we have such a rigid parental structure,
Mm-hmm.
because you're only being influenced by 2 people, and both those people have their kind of probably likely have similar perspectives to a degree because that's where they got together and got married. And then you're locked into a parental unit that is very one-sided. And I'm like, why hasn't we as a culture evolved or progressed where, you have, I don't know, you're at 5 parental figures, like male and 5 parental female figures within a social structure to allow for a massive amount of progress on both parts. Like, the parents themselves would have to deal with each other, so therefore they would benefit from that side of, because again, not conflict, that's the wrong word, but just like different perspectives. And the child would, get loads of them, and they would all harmonize and just be like, look, this is lots of different perspectives. No one's right or wrong. It's just different ways of thinking. And yes, again, idealistic, stupid, like unicorn type mentality. But just the last week or two, I was just thinking about that. I'm just like, it's so narrow,
Mm-hmm.
the structure we have.
No, I enjoy questioning processes that are just the way they've always been. Do they really need to be that way? My first answer to this particular question was going to be, well, they are the biological parents. But when you adopt a child, you can, from what I hear, you can love them just as much as a biological parent.
Yeah.
So
love isn't a biological thing, is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if is there a bond between a parent and a child? Like, also think of other species like fish or something. Do they feel a connection, or is it all just
we assume they don't.
norms?
We assume we're the only beings that, at least in this world, that are capable of a higher level of love or whatever.
I suppose so. Yeah, I haven't thought about it that way.
Because you have a physical attachment,
Mm-hmm.
which is your chemistry, which we sometimes call love, but actually that's tends to be more a not lust, that's the wrong word, but a physical connection type thing. But love itself actually often overrides the physical, because physical things like jealousy, like come into your brain for survival reasons, evolution reasons. One of the things, obsession, we often mistake love for obsession, and then actually, if you do love someone, you're able to override that obsession, because you see the bigger picture. So when it comes to children, linking it back, I think you can very much, as an individual, have a capacity to love beyond what is physical. Just my random thoughts on it all.
Yeah, makes sense what you're saying. I've heard about the biological imperative, that we all have this drive in us to keep our genetic material alive. I've actually met people who said explicitly that for them, the purpose of life is to keep their genes going. So even when they, as an individual, die, they are happy knowing that, I guess, at least half of their material, since it's mixed with that of their partner, lives on in their children.
Yeah.
So there is that. I've never felt the need to keep my DNA or whatever alive. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that the people you've spoken to have said it consciously, because most people it's just a subconscious thing. It's just or like a genetic thing. It's an evolutionary thing to keep the species alive. They just have that drive to keep the genes going.
And we will kill other species to make sure that ours survives.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating. But anyway, that was just a random side tangent.
No, it's interesting. It's why not?
Maybe
It's part of the overall topic of personal identity.
Yeah.
Like being a child in a family with two parents, or is something else possible?
Yeah,
sure.
Because I think again, having one parent can just be as beneficial as having 20 parents, let's say, or two parents, or even more so. It all depends, I guess, on the individual circumstance. And I guess, that's my own little conclusion from my own sort of tangent right now. Is that actually, ultimately, I don't think it matters, because as long as you're getting what class is good and loving upbringing, it shouldn't matter whether it's 1, 2, 12, whatever.
Yeah, in some cultures, the larger family has more importance. Like children will have more contact with their grandparents, and they will all live in one big house. I've even seen that in Germany. With single families, not a whole settlement or something. But there are certain cultures that have a slightly different view. But the two-parent thing is a predominant one, as far as I know.
Yeah.
I heard that communism had a slightly different view on this as well. That the ties, the biological ties, didn't matter as much. I don't know enough about this actually, but just that there were some very liberal family conditions, I guess, or just living conditions where several families lived together and all the adults raised all the children, no matter who was whose progenitor.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm connecting this with communism because everyone just belonged to the state anyway. Everyone was on one level.
Yeah.
And it's like your children didn't even belong to you. I mean, you had the same connection to them as to everyone else because everyone was equal under the state.
Yeah.
So we should get into that more in a separate episode.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think.
And I feel better prepared.
Yeah. So that's my bad. Just having random thoughts come into my head. But I guess
you have a link back. Okay.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, like linking it back. We're talking about regulation of
machines.
The machines, and I guess in a weird segue is that again regulating machines, regulating humans. That's the same. Like who says that's okay? Who says that's not okay?
Yeah.
And then there are certain parameters. We have governments for obviously the social side of things. But for machines and for the AI that we've been talking about last episode and this episode is who is regulating this? Who is actually, what safety parameters are there out there that actually stop us going too far, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, and often you don't know what is too far until it's behind you in the past, already happened. So the scientific method would be, let's test it first in controlled environments until we know how this system works and we can predict better. But then people are not that patient. They say, no, that's too limiting. We can't wait that long. We want to live our lives now. It's difficult to know what's right and wrong, what will be the consequences of laws and regulations if they are enforced. Yeah. So there was this debate on Twitter several months ago between Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk.
Yeah, you mentioned that towards the end of last episode. So yeah.
Did I? Okay. Because Elon Musk is someone who is very aware, I would say. At least he's put a lot of thought into the possible outcomes of the progression of technology, and in particular AI, the way it's going now. And I don't know how the beef started, but I can see how Mark Zuckerberg would be the opposite, how he is always open for innovation. He will just go and do it and ask questions later. I mean, he's been in front of Congress like at least twice now. I saw a summary of the last one just a few days ago, answering the concerns that senators and Congress people have. And this time it was about his new digital currency, which he called a cryptocurrency, but it's not decentralized, so I wouldn't call it that. Libra, have you heard of it?
Not yet, no.
No?
I don't. Yeah.
Well, Facebook wants to come out with their own digital currency. And of course, the government is afraid of that because of all the advantages they have of being in charge of the money in the world.
Yes.
And that would be very much lost. I don't know the word. Compromised. Their power would be very much compromised.
Good word, yeah.
Okay. Elon Musk is someone who believes that we should not just go and advance AI as much as possible, as fast as possible. Because, yeah, even though obviously there are advantages like comfort, just producibility, what's the word, productivity, making money.
Yeah,
and,
I mean,
and he has done a lot of that.
Yeah, if a machine can do everything we can, well, we don't have to do anything, so we can let them do it, and then we get a nice, easy life.
Right. He's not afraid of that. That is a concern of some people as well. He's just afraid of the destructive power that it's a bit like the Cold War, you know, that there were the Soviets and the Americans just kept building up their arsenal so that they could have blown up the world 5 times over or so. And in the meantime, it's probably a lot more than that. So that's not necessary. And with AI,
whoever gets there first will have the power and therefore have the control.
Yeah. Julian Assange has said the more powerful AI gets, the more it matters in whose hands it is. And then he also emphasized cryptography. So the person who is the best at protecting their data by encrypting it, will have more power over those people who are not as good as encrypting their data, because there will always be this back and forth, like I protect my data with this program, someone else manages to hack it, so I need to update my protection and so on. And AI will obviously be used to hack encryptions. So that's another aspect.
That is fascinating. It's something actually I haven't thought that much about, actually. So I mean, we've seen The Matrix. I've watched iRobot. Did you ever? Not iRobot. Mr. Robot.
A few episodes, yeah.
And just again that concept that of hacking and counter hacking and protecting yourself, cybersecurity. Like, I don't think we appreciate. I know I don't. What is going on behind the scenes of every country as they progress their technology and computing technology, having to protect all their data, and then through, I guess, the desire to keep ahead of the game and trying to hack other countries and trying to find out what they're doing.
Yeah,
that's quite terrifying, actually. I mean, like if you don't just ignore it.
Yeah, we just live in our blissful ignorance, and we don't even know how many people are working to keep us protected. I mean, some of them are really interested in doing that. You probably know my general opinion of military and intelligence community, but there are good people among them. Sometimes they're called the white hats, or ethical hackers, stuff like that, who really do want to protect us and not exploit our data, our money, our talent, our workforce. Militaries usually have these digital AI departments now, because the digital world is just as militarized or just as important and dangerous as the physical.
So in terms of AI, the terminology, so we probably talked about this in the last episode and I've forgotten, but because in my head AI is always the peak consciousness, but these days, in the last sort of 5 years, they're using AI in lots of different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the definition, I guess, of, is it just anything that's can create its own little systems?
Wow, no, you're going way beyond the way that I've been using the word. Even when you said peak of consciousness, you're talking about like really self-sustaining artificial life forms, right?
Because in general sci-fi, that's always as it's used. An AI is
Right.
is a computer that can, or machine that
Okay.
can pretty much.
Well, good thing you asked the question then, since there can be very different interpretations. Yeah, sci-fi is usually futuristic, right? So it's talking about the potential of the thing we have now is independent life forms, complicated relations between machine and man, stuff like that, sure. But right now, we use AI pretty much synonymously with machine learning. And that term is a bit more established in science and engineering.
Yeah.
So a system is intelligent whenever it can just make decisions that are not obvious and that are not totally explicitly told to it by a human.
So what, you code it and then you give it access to a certain amount of data and it can just
Yes,
learn it what it wants to from that data.
exactly. That's the state of AI currently.
Okay.
You know, and that doesn't sound very advanced, right? But the normal approach used to be that you give it rules and it will make decisions based on those rules. So decision trees is an example of when it's helping you to decide whether or what to wear before you leave the house, to be prepared for the weather. So if it's a certain temperature, then do this, or if it's a certain humidity, or what has been the record of the weather in the last few hours and days, and can we predict the weather for today and tomorrow and so on based on that. So if you just give it explicit rules, like if the temperature is above 20 degrees, do this, or if humidity is high, or the sky is very cloudy, take an umbrella, stuff like that. That is rule-based decision making. Now the new thing is data-based inference, but inference is just like predicting based on what you have now, what should you do. Prediction in AI doesn't always mean what will the future be like. It just means, given this data, what is the best outcome or the best advice. So yeah, data about temperature, humidity, and so on. We no longer claim that we know what is the best action for which condition. We just say in the past, under these conditions, this was done, and this would have been ideal. So now, given the current set of conditions, what should we do so that we will have the best outcome? And the algorithm will go through the data, learn patterns, pick up on irregularities, implicit rules that were just part of the nature of the topic of the problem.
The great thing about that is the chaos element, because you have people's personal feelings about a certain color, or that's their favorite top, so they're going to wear that even if it is raining. I'm still going to put that on because even if I get wet, I still want to look good, blah blah blah. Which machines must get very confused with.
Yes, the more human elements come into the problem, the more unpredictable it becomes.
Yeah,
that is predictable. Anyway, so that's how machine.
That was a good breakdown. That was a really good breakdown for me personally, just the difference.
Yeah, and you've probably heard the term neural net. That is the architecture of the algorithm that is most used these days. It's very powerful. It's not new at all. It's been around for at least 30 years, probably more. but it's back in style now and used almost ubiquitously in computer science because the hardware has improved. Just because computers have gotten faster and stronger, not because the idea, the mathematics behind it has improved that much. We are improving that too, now that you can test things in a lot less time than you used to. But the core idea is still the same. So
it's interesting. The idea is, I guess, advances the technology, and the technology advances the idea.
yeah,
It's,
that's true. That's kind of like the first question we ask, right? How do we change when technology changes? And I think we should. But then if we change in a bad way, should we really progress in technology?
yeah. I guess, again, how do we define bad? I guess by
Yeah.
becoming more, I guess maybe by our own personal opinions, more selfish, more anti kindness, I guess.
Yeah. Well, one simple way is how much are you hurting people? For example, how much are you killing people? And that's okay, that's not always simple to calculate. When you shoot someone, then the chain of causality is really short, and you can tell because this person did this, this person got hurt or even died. But if it's a lot more subtle and taken on a like huge timeline and over huge masses of people, then the causality is really difficult to find. But I believe Gandhi once said, whether you shoot someone or starve them to death over a period of years, it's the same to me.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of violence.
I think that's how I look at it as well.
Suffering is something I think a lot of people can agree on, no matter what their religious or philosophical background is.
It's a good way of defining it. It's definitely, yeah, suffering.
So relieving suffering is, in my view, progress. That's a pretty universal one. But just making life easier isn't always as valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're supposed to go through hard times, and we're supposed to grow in certain ways. And if
how the species evolves.
Yeah, if all of that is gone, what is the purpose of life if it's not to develop and grow and change over time?
Well, this week's random June reference is, I'm going to put it in here now, is that in the 4th June book, it talks a lot about the predator and the prey, and how the both species are progressed by each other. So the predator, goes hunts whatever the species that's being hunted, the prey, adapts over time, evolves, finds a way to counter the predator. Predator then has to evolve and find a way to counter the prey's evasion of it, and it's a constant cycle of progressing and changing. And again, who knows into what, because that's the constant variables that get changed. And I think we forget that a lot. We seem to remember that physical hardship makes us stronger. So going to the gym, you're going to lift weight, that's going to make you stronger. But we forget that often it's the, I guess, psychological and the emotional hard times that give us things like willpower and perspective, choice, because often if we don't make the choice, we become bitter when bad things happen to us. Over time, you can easily become angry and bitter, and therefore we need to understand that we have a choice here, and we can try and slowly, over time, not be controlled by that natural reaction. And I guess how does technology help us do that? I guess it's a good question. I guess the internet's been a massive thing for that, because it's the connection between people. If you try and connect people, it also isolates as well. But
you can. Yeah, it seems like no matter what stage we're at technologically, we always need to learn the same set of principles, about what is right and wrong, who am I, how do I want other people to treat me, how should I treat them,
what's my place in the universe, how does my existence mean anything? Questions like that get as you say, no matter where you are on the technological scale, those questions are always going to be there.
You know how grandparents live, like they stop progressing with the technology, and they still use technology from before, at least a lot of them. And I get it. I don't think that's wrong.
Oh, no, the change is difficult.
Yeah. And so when you tell them about the challenges of your life, you know, growing up with the current technology, they'll say, like, "Oh, it sounds so complicated. Times used to be so much simpler before." But everyone went through similar challenges, even if it manifests in a different way. Your character is tested. You bond with people. You sacrifice. You grow. You learn things. You find out more about who you are.
It's all just so much more extreme now, and in such a faster pace.
Yeah.
Like, I do not envy teenagers and children of today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are bombarded with, again, the technology, and the interaction of the selfish side of people. So the businesses, the media, the politics around a lot of things, where they are constantly being advertised to, told this is right, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Level of confusion they go through at an early age. Again, it's important to get these questions, ask these questions, and to learn what your sort of, I guess, moral or intellectual, or social, I can't say the word, cultural, like, integrity is. But you shouldn't be having to do that at like 9 years old, when you're
Right.
being bombarded by advertisements about buying this, but you're getting your heartstrings like plucked by a advertisement that tells you how poor everyone is in this place, and you should be making these choices by buying this product. And it's just like, and that happens all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw on the news some children, maybe 12 or 14, at climate change protests, just losing it because they can't handle the fatalistic perspective. And I think everyone needs to work on that. If they, you know, a lot of people will just suppress the idea of climate catastrophe. That's how a lot of people deal with it. But some want to expose themselves to these terrible thoughts of where we're headed, and it can overwhelm them. I also need to find a balance between those two sides. Like, how much will I open up to thinking about it, and how much am I not ready for it?
Yeah. And how much we can do.
Yeah. Or another a thought I had when you were talking was like how early does information overload already happen?
Interesting.
Nowadays, like it used to be the way, like one generation ago, I think, where some young people were exposed to pornography and a lot of them weren't. So it was a question whether you had to deal with that early on. And nowadays it's just when does it happen? And it's, I don't know the statistic, but I read that on average nowadays, boys at the age of 11 are confronted with the topic. How do I deal with this? What am I feeling? What's going on? I don't know what to do. So yeah, it shouldn't have to be that early, that young.
Certain educations should be slow, gentle,
careful,
and again specific to the individual. It's just like if a group is bombarded with one thing, they're all going to act differently. They're all going to behave differently. They're all going to respond differently. But they no longer have a choice. They no longer have a choice to just do it at their own pace. Like on the playground and in the classrooms and after school and stuff, if they aren't understanding it at the same pace as other people, they'll be bullied for it. And that's a potentially a downside to information overload. And because we have so much technology, it's just everyone's exposed to it all the time, and we're taught, parents should regulate it and help, like whatever else, but there needs to be a bigger social push, probably, maybe, in my opinion, for help with that. It's not as easy because, again, if your parents are regulating it, cool, that's fine. You'll be seen as an outsider at school because you don't know what else is going on, and then you'll get exposed to it by your friends, and then it'll be maybe out of context. Certain things will be out of context. Who knows? Again, but it just feels like there's no support. You're just told as a parent to, okay, if you don't want your kids to expose yourself, just regulate it. It's your decision. But there should be more guidance, maybe, to make others realize that we should have social conscience about others' people exposure to it. More sensitivity, maybe. More sensitivity.
Yeah. Topics like this make me wonder if we're going to divide and cluster more in the future, so that the only way to protect yourself and your children from certain ideas or people, from influences, from information, will just be to distance yourself from them, and that maybe like new collections or societies of people will form around shared values rather than nationality or wealth.
That's an interesting thought. I think it would probably implode first and then evolve into that, maybe. I don't know how gradual that process potentially would be, maybe.
Yeah, usually
again,
the bad thing has to happen before we change.
Yeah, you'd have to isolate yourself and find others that want to do it too. Then go back to money. You'd have to have enough money to sort of sustain your system. And then again, it's a shame you'd have to narrow yourself away from other perspectives. But if it is a protection thing, so that you're not creating let's say, a society that has so much anxiety or fear, then maybe running a little bit away from it, avoiding it, is better than being so exposed to it all the time. I think maybe I'm gonna think more about it. But what you've said about cultures dividing into little communities, countries dividing into communities, where you stick to people that have the same sort of perspective on technology, I think maybe is probably what we're talking about. Is that right?
Or ethics,
the exposure to technology, or the ethics of technology, or the ethics to, or just ethics in general.
Yes, in general is what I meant, but I'm open to linking it back to technology.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are communities like this already, like kibbutz, live a lot less capitalistic. They are more socialist. They take care of each other more.
Have you seen The Village, the film The Village?
No.
Okay. Maybe I've mentioned this before, I can't remember. But it's the guy that plays the Joker at the moment. How do you pronounce his name? Joaquin Phoenix?
I don't know.
Joaquin Phoenix, whatever. And they've gone back to a sort of 1800s sort of lifestyle.
Like the Amish?
Yeah, basically. They're in a village, and they're in the film's about them in their own community. And what happens to it? Just how it appears to be this sort of paradise, and then social things still come into play and sort of a breakdown. Kind of. It's more complicated than that, and more simple at the same time. But I don't want to give anything away.
All right. I just thought of another movie as well on the topic. Keanu Reeves is this alien, and he's not the only protagonist. You also follow this young mother and her child. And so
I think I have seen it.
He's impressed by the love that she has for the child. How she is willing to sacrifice her own life for the child to live on. So that's one thing that is a big plus for humanity, because he just comes with this prejudice that humanity has just been terrible for the planet, so it has to die out so that the planet has a chance of healing, which is very understandable. I see where the premise comes from. But the lady tries to protect humanity basically with everything she can think of. And she's really smart. She goes and takes them to her dad, or they end up there for some reason. And the dad is an intellectual. And he says, we've been at a point like this in our history several times. And people are lazy, or they will not do something until it's absolutely necessary. But when they're at the precipice, when they are looking destruction, annihilation in the face,
Down
they
the barrel
will
of the gun.
suddenly change, even if it's a drastic change. And that's what it had to come to in the movie as well, for people to start over.
Yeah, that's always been my sort of argument, I guess, when people start to get despairing and going, "Oh, humanity's so bad these days," blah blah blah. I'm like, no, look at every crisis that happens, whether natural disaster, war. Like, yes, that's caused by a minority of selfish people, the war, but the general humanity, they will help each other. Yeah. They will look out for each other. They will die for each other, to make it work, to survive. And I always fall back on that's what happens. Again, there's pockets of people who will take advantage or whatever else. But actually, yeah, the majority of people just band together. But it has to be the extreme for some reason. For some reason, it has to be the extreme.
Yeah, suddenly we realize that, oh, we actually have a lot in common. Like, we want to survive, for example. And so we have that common enemy, and we need to stick together to overpower it. And then suddenly we focus on the common values we have. Yeah. One other movie I want to mention, or I should say series, is Star Trek, especially The Next Generation. There's this Greek politician, Yanis Varoufakis, who was the Minister of Finance in Greece for a short while, until he saw how corrupt government is and how he can't really make any change for the better as a minister. And so he said he left government to enter politics. And he says, whenever he's asked, so what kind of society are you working for? What would you like to see? Like, is it more socialist? Is it more capitalist? And he says, no, forget that paradigm. And then he shows clips on his phone from YouTube that he bookmarked about The Next Generation. And especially this one episode where, have you seen The Next Generation?
Again, I can't remember many of the episodes, but I do love it. I do love the...
Obviously, there are hundreds of episodes, but let's see if you know this one. I think 3 people were asleep in cryogenic sleep for several centuries. They come from our time, and The Next Generation plays, I don't know, in the 24th century or so, where people live in abundance. There's no longer need for food, rationing.
There's no currency, there's no...
Right. And what is the purpose of their life? It's to expand your horizon, right? That's why we follow the adventures of the explorative Navy, going out into space, making contact with new life forms and stuff like that, and in the process getting to know themselves better. So I love this idea, and he says we need to work towards getting there. So one of the guys that comes from our time is rich, and he loves the challenge of just being better than the next guy. Yeah. And when he looks around how they live on is it the Enterprise?
Yeah,
I get them mixed up. He says, so what do you do with your life if it's not the challenge to get more money, to do better, to always be better than someone else? And I say, well, improve yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people. You have value by yourself, and just try to improve other people's lives when you have enough for yourself. And just learn, develop. You can never have enough of that.
it's difficult though, because we're so used to a tangible thing. So if I have £1 million, I have a quantifiable thing. And it may be more than someone else, therefore, woohoo, go me, I'm doing well. The problem is that we're so used to measuring things that we think that actually trying to be self-aware, be more conscious of other people, there's no way really to measure that.
Right. The
and
things
therefore
that you cannot assign numbers are the more valuable things. Like, I love you 5.
yeah, good reference. Yeah, and we need to move, again, personal opinion, we need to move away from that obsession with putting a value on things. Things are just again, I use this a lot recently with people when I talk about right and wrong, good and bad, positive, negative. We use these things to quantify stuff, but so often they just are. Like, we don't need to assign a label. They still exist without that label, and it becomes more harmonious without that label. Going back to the whole, money, or as you say, I love you 5, I love you 10. It's like it suddenly becomes a competition again, and that's where it falls short. That's where it's no longer what it should be.
Yeah, it's just the comparison.
Yeah,
we should definitely have an episode on this.
Yeah, there's a few branches. There's a few topics that we've kind of touched on that we can have episode or 2 about. But I guess to kind of heading towards a conclusion, I guess, of this sort of episode is that I've really enjoyed the AI explanation, just for my own sake, really, and I think again the good balance between discussion between technology and ethical things, like social things. I really enjoy the contrast between them, because you could quite easily we could just talk about the technology side of things, and then we could, in another episode, we could just talk about the cultural things. But actually, we have discussed them both intertwined, and I've liked that a lot.
Good. Yeah, I hope we could get some thoughts going in our audience's minds. I think that's one of the main purposes of the podcast, just to get you thinking about some interesting questions. We don't pretend to know the answers. We are just interested in making people more aware.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that was a good episode, and hopefully any questions you have, we have Facebook, we have
Twitter,
social media.
Yeah, just go on the homepage, whoamipodcast.com.
Join in the discussion. And then next time we'll figure out a topic and go from there.
All right. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening. Bye.